Your goal is to be mission driven and drive credibility and trust back to your company as quickly as possible. So just like you need to stay consistent in relationship building and trust behind the scenes, you've got to do that visibly as well in order to scale faster. So if you're better in a one-on-one scenario, finding ways to incorporate that into your content in terms of relationship building can play a huge key to your success of your business if you do that consistently over time. And again, it doesn't have to be at a high frequency, but it has to be ever present, and you can't let it go outdated or that can really hurt your business.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where we explore the mindset, skills, and strategies that leaders need to grow influence that truly matters. This episode is especially relevant for leaders who feel called to make an impact, but don't have unlimited time, money, or resources to do it. My guest is Paige Velasquez Budde, digital strategist, CEO, and author of The Strategic Business Influencer, Building a Brand with a Small Budget. Paige challenges the idea that influence is reserved for those with big platforms or big marketing budgets. Instead, she offers a practical, strategic approach to building credibility, trust, and visibility without burning out or pretending to be someone you're not. Paige has helped hundreds of entrepreneurs and executives build influence without breaking the bank, and her book distills those insights into a practical roadmap for anyone looking to grow their brand with intention and authenticity. Paige Velasquez Budde, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you so much, Roger, for that kind introduction, and I'm truly excited for our conversation today.
Well, let's start with this. Please give us a definition of a strategic business influencer and tell us how such a person differs from people like Kim Kardashian and Taylor Swift.
Absolutely. That's a really good place to start. And when people hear the term strategic business influencer, their minds most often associate this phrase with pop culture influencers, like you mentioned, that drive mostly cultural outcomes and consumer trends really at a mass scale. So their goal is fame. What I really wanted to do with strategic business influencer is flip the meaning of influencer on its head with more of a business lens. So in pop culture, influence is really built around that mass visibility and entertainment. Attention is really the currency there. But a strategic business influencer really operates in an entirely different lane. So they're not trying to reach everyone. Normally, a strategic business influencer is not trying to reach millions of people. They're trying to reach the right people. And I argue that that starts with reaching the right 500 people. So you're not relying on virality, being a spectacle, or having that mass appeal. Instead, it's really about credibility, consistency, and alignment between who a leader is and what they lead. So just to get really practical with a quick definition, and I'm getting there, I promise. A strategic business influencer is a business leader who strategically uses their visibility at scale to accelerate trust and drive measurable business impact. So it's not about that attention. It's not about that popularity. These are just operators, they're founders, they're executives who understand that in today's environment, people trust people more than logos. So that visibility is important.
So having that mindset is critical at the very beginning.
Right. Absolutely.
So when trying to influence with limited resources, what are the most common mistakes people seem to make?
Yeah, there are typically three of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is when they have limited resources, they use it as an excuse not to focus on their leadership brand. So they try to pour everything for years into building that corporate brand only. And to be clear, a good amount of focus should go into your corporate brand, but it's much harder to win in a competitive environment by going just logo to logo with a competitor who has much deeper pockets than you. The reality is influence is built faster and more affordably when leaders who are willing to become more visible and become credible representatives of the business. Staying behind the company really slows down that trust. I would say another mistake that I commonly see is allowing fear to keep leaders invisible. So we have the servant leader. A lot of leaders believe that staying behind the scenes is really either humble or noble. But in today's environment, invisibility is not neutral. So if you are a leader of a company in today's day and age, you are visible online, whether you like it or not. And that's the cold, hard truth. But if you're not controlling your leadership brand, if you're just ignoring that, you're leaving it up to others to define your story, to define your credibility, to define your value. And leaders with limited resources cannot afford to let the first impression be accidental or outdated, because that can harm your business. So choosing to not engage is still a choice. And it's oftentimes really costly for your business. So even if you are in the right mindset and you're ready to start building your brand, you've got to make sure on the flip side that you really focus on what's going to matter most and not try to do everything at once.
Well, the word strategic is really critical here then.
That's right. Absolutely.
So you write about influence ID. What exactly is that?
So it's a framework that I created for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and leaders to really establish their clarity, their credibility, and consistency for their executive brand and their company. So it's essentially a one-page articulation of who you are, where you came from, where you're going, and why your leadership matters beyond your title. So I liken this process to a passport because there are many parallels when you look at creating your influence ID and applying for a passport. So you have to have a passport and submit the right credible information to access new destinations. You have to start with an application that states where you're coming from. And then all of that information is distilled into that one-page ID that clearly shows who you are. And before you're issued that passport, you have to get all that information verified. Is it truly reflecting who you are and what you've put on that application? And then from there, one of the final steps to the passport is stating where you are looking to go. What stamps are you looking to obtain? Why do you need this passport? Now, if we think about it from an influence ID standpoint, for some leaders, these future stamps that they want to obtain are maybe new revenue levels for their company, new ventures that they want to start, awards, acquisitions, stages that they want to be on. So I've distilled all of this into a 5-step process to creating the influence ID.
Now, you say that when someone goes to a website or, say, a LinkedIn page, they form their first impression in 50 milliseconds, or about 1/20th of a second. What's the implication of that for someone trying to build a personal brand?
Yeah, it has huge implications. And to be clear, in today's environment, first impressions are no longer happening in person. We all know as business leaders how important a first impression is. But the reality is your first impression as a leader is now happening either on page 1 of Google or an AI platform when somebody searches your name. And the stat that you just shared, Roger, about, that first impression happens in 50 milliseconds is absolutely sobering statistic that I found in my research, and it kills me. Absolutely kills me because I spend so much time in my profession as a strategist on website and content strategy. But the reality is that first impression doesn't start with content. What it means, the stat means, is that visuals matter tremendously when it comes to creating the right first impression. So when someone lands on your LinkedIn profile and there is kind of that big image at the top and then your profile picture, if you don't have an image on there, if it's just the standard connecting dots LinkedIn image or an image of a beautiful cityscape or of the mountains, or it's a company logo that I've never seen before, that image is doing nothing for you. In fact, it could really be harming your first impression. The same thing happens when somebody lands on your website and the first thing that they see on the screen, that big image on top, which is what we call a hero image before you scroll, is a stock image. You could find that on any website you land on, a stock image.
Sure.
So you want the visuals to say what you won't say about yourself, which you are the top leader in your industry. You have the most credibility. And so the important thing to realize is content is important to reinforce trust and accelerate education in your mission. But the reality is most people are never going to get to that content unless they know you are the leader in your industry.
Right.
And so you have to show that visually.
So you've talked about visual impressions. How can copy for a website or a LinkedIn profile be written so it doesn't come across as self-promotional and salesy?
Yes. So this is, I would say, probably a little bit of a hot take, you might call it.
Yeah.
And it's longly been debated, but I truly believe that you should be writing, especially your biography, in third person.
Mm-hmm.
That is where you're able to come off most credible, but it still sounds humble. It's really hard to reinforce credibility in a biography if you were doing it in first person without it coming off salesy.
Right.
And there's an argument especially on LinkedIn, that a first person biography makes you more personable and all these things that I think if you're doing a biography right and bringing all the credibility you need to bring into it, third person is the best way to go. Now, when it comes to the content that you're putting out on LinkedIn on your posts, that should be the first person authentic where you're able to really build that humanity there.
Sure. And it reinforces your brand as being an expert.
That's right. Absolutely.
So what are the keys to ensuring that a website is easily discoverable?
The foundations of discoverability are truly rapidly changing. So especially with AI discoverability, I would say in the past 6 months to a year to even 3 months, this changes so quickly. But most business owners do have down the nuts and bolts when it comes to good SEO around their company name. Where I see an issue most often is when your company website does not rank or is not discoverable when somebody searches your name as a leader. And again, your goal as a strategic business influencer is to be an on-ramp as quickly as possible to your business. So you want your company website coming up in those top 3 listings on a search for your name. When it does not come up when you search your name, it's most likely due to an SEO indexing issue for your brand name. So to increase those chances of the website ranking high for your name, I really encourage leaders to create a single page on your website for you as an executive leader. So this is going to house your name, your photo, a professional biography, again, written in third person, and potentially a link to your LinkedIn page. And we want this to be a clickable standalone page where it has, your companyname.com/about/your first name, last name. If you have one of those websites and you're saying, I already have a biography, but it's not ranking, most of the time what I see is it's one of those click and it'll pop up at another screen with your biography, or it'll drop down with your biography. We want a standalone page. This is a really technical thing, but extremely important for the right SEO strategy, for the right indexing strategy when it comes to Google and AI algorithms.
So, for people wanting to build a brand, a harsh reality is that social media platforms own the data. What are the keys to building and nurturing an audience that you own?
This is a really hard lesson for brands to learn. I think we've been conditioned in today's environment to build as big of an audience on social media as we can. And of course, that's extremely important. But where brands have lost out is they haven't done anything with that audience. They've let the social media channels like LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok own them. Well, the reality is they can change their algorithm at any time, and your access to that audience is taken away.
And sometimes they do.
They absolutely. Roger, I'll tell you, almost every month they're changing that algorithm. But there's been massive shifts that were really detrimental to brands throughout the history of social media. And so what I would encourage you to think about is capturing as much as you can with that visibility that you're generating on social media and siphon off that audience to own the connection with them. So bringing them back to what I call owned media. And the best way to do this is by having a clear call to action, a clear what I call lead magnet to get them from the social media site to your website to absolutely take some sort of action through a lead magnet that gives you their data.
Right.
Your goal is with every person that lands on your website, extend the interaction with them. That is how you win in today's environment.
Right. So speaking of lead magnets, what kind of lead magnets seem to be most effective?
Sure. So there are a few different types of lead magnets. Typically, 3 categories are the most popular. You have the just sign up now lead magnet, which is what you typically see on most websites that you land on, which is a sign up for this newsletter, sign up for this discount, whatever that might be. That typically converts at a pretty horrific rate, about 2% at best, if you're not a well-known brand.
You didn't say terrific, you said horrific.
Horrific.
Yes, okay. All right.
So 2% at best conversion if you're not a huge well-known brand.
Yeah.
And that's because they don't know the value that they're going to get. People are more skeptical than ever to give out their information. So that's category 1 typically. Category 2 is some sort of free exchange of information. So I want you to think, give me your email address or phone number and I'll send you a white paper on the latest research that I have, or I'll send you a free ebook. This typically converts a little bit better, this type of lead magnet. But at best, for brands where people know and trust already, you're typically seeing about a 10% conversion. And so still a little bit better, but it's not great. I would say the best conversion that we see with lead magnets is this category 3, which is more of an interactive lead magnet. Typically, it's through some type of free assessment or quiz, some type of interactive content where the value is all about what the user is going to receive instantly. People want to know more about themselves instantly. And so the more value that you can give on the front end, the higher conversion that you're going to have. And also you're able to collect data about the people that are visiting your site that are interested in learning more by the way that they're answering these questions. So you could be much more effective on the back end with targeting your follow-up and nurture sequences. I know, Roger, you have one of these on your website, an assessment. These just work extremely well. Typically, we see a 24% conversion or more, so more than doubling what we typically see with the first 2 categories.
Well, people appreciate that kind of tool because it helps them learn about themselves.
Right.
It gives them data in exchange for their data.
Absolutely. You're starting off with giving value, which is so incredibly important.
Right. So you mentioned call to action. What's the key to creating a compelling call to action?
Yes. I would say the biggest mistake people make with call to action is they push a sell. especially if you're using AI or your content. The call to actions are so salesy, it makes me cringe. So remember, your goal is not to push a sell. Most audience members are not going to be ready to buy after consuming one piece of content. So your priority has to be educate, build trust, nurture. So provide that value. You have to craft the right message that spurs your audience to take action. And so really looking at what's the question that they want answered most. What do they want to learn about themselves most? What is going to be incredibly valuable for them? Again, you're not pushing them into that sell, you're pushing them to that lead magnet, that next step. And then from there, you can nurture them and get into more of a sales call to action. But we've worked with several leaders that have created these assessments and quizzes. And one of my favorite ones was just working with an executive named Lisa Stein. And she had this confidence language quiz, and it just blew up really quickly. And her call to action was all about, do I have superpowers? This is a question I'm often asked most. This is why I created a quiz for women to take the free assessment to uncover insights for their strengths and talents. So she starts with that question that most women are asking themselves after they consume that content, and then goes into, hey, this is free. Here's what you're going to learn. And then that gets people from the social media platform or the interview that they just did to her website to take that assessment. She's not pushing any type of product. She's not pushing anything that people have to pay for. She's just sharing value.
Right. And along the way, she's able to assess how that interaction is going, how many times people come back to engage with her.
That's right.
Again, it's all about building trust.
Absolutely. And making sure that the follow-up is intentional. So
yes,
making sure that you understand how people are answering questions, what categories they're falling in on the results, and segmenting your email list or your data list to have the right nurture strategy. That's extremely important to keep an audience engaged.
So when money is tight, what's the first branding investment you recommend?
This is a good question, and it's a hard question, and you're probably not going to love my answer, but it really depends on your goals. So again, the word strategic is so important. You got to be focused on what's actually going to drive business impact based on your goals. Now, I will say any activity such as, content, lead magnets, social media that we've been talking about, none of that works well if you don't have your first impression right. So I would say, before investing in any of that, invest in getting that first impression right. Whether that's investing time, whether that's investing resources to redo those visuals on your website or your social media channels. Because you have to have that right in order for everything else to matter.
As you talk about first impressions, I find myself being especially grateful that my wife gave me a second chance because apparently the first impression wasn't the best.
Oh, no.
But 59 years later, we are very happy. Let's put it that way. So in actual practice, what does scrappy but strategic branding look like?
Sure. For a lot of leaders, as they go into this process of building strategic business influence, the biggest part of it is maybe overwhelm, whether it's overwhelm in potentially the amount of resources this might take or time, most importantly for most leaders. But what I like to encourage people with how to stay scrappy is thinking about what are you already doing behind the scenes as a leader that is moving the needle for your business? And how do we just bring a little bit more strategic visibility to that? So if we think about the role of a CEO, an entrepreneur, one of the most important things for them to be doing is educating and building trust in relationships. And if you think about it, a lot of that work is exactly what they're doing. So thinking about how do we do that just more intentionally visibly in order to drive business results. And so that's what I like to encourage people to think about. Is it's oftentimes hard to get your head wrapped around it, but it's really simple at the end of the day.
Well, if something is working well for you in your workplace, there's a good chance it could work well for somebody else in their workplace.
That's right.
So typically, if you are an effective leader, there are things that you are doing that other people can learn from. You just haven't thought about sharing those things.
Right.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
So what role does consistency play in building trust and influence?
Yes. Consistency is incredibly important. And I want to be really clear. We're talking about consistency, not a high frequency.
Right.
So the question that I often get asked is, what's, the magic formula to how many times a week I need to be posting on LinkedIn? And I just kind of laugh because as we talked about, that algorithm changes every 3 to 4 weeks. So I could tell you something today, it could be completely different several weeks from now. But consistency is important when it comes to your influence ID, how you're being portrayed online. You've got to renew that ID every 5 years to make sure that it's truly reflecting who you are. It's also important to stay consistent with the quality of value that you're delivering. Your goal is to be mission driven and drive credibility and trust back to your company as quickly as possible. So just like you need to stay consistent in relationship building and trust behind the scenes, you've got to do that visibly as well in order to scale faster. So if you're better in a one-on-one scenario, finding ways to incorporate that into your content in terms of relationship building can play a huge key to your success of your business if you do that consistently over time. And again, it doesn't have to be at a high frequency, but it has to be ever present, and you can't let it go outdated or that can really hurt your business.
Well, in this day and age, it's not uncommon, not just for younger people, but more seasoned people, to change organizations every 3 to 5 years. That's fairly common now.
It is.
So how can leaders align their personal brand with their organization's brand if they change organizations?
Well, at the end of the day, that's a really good question. At the end of the day, it all has to align with your why.
Right.
And in the influence ID framework, I talk about, content pillars being one of those steps and your one-liner being one of those steps. And your content pillars are kind of like your North Star, your guiding map of, here are the top values or the top, subject matter expertise things that I'm going to talk about. And so it's really about, connecting why you do what you do, the influence that you want to have, whether it's with your job or other things that you're involved with, philanthropic matters, family, whatever that might be, and weaving that thread between the two. So why are you a good representation of the organization? And once you're able to weave that thread, you're able to create that on-ramp a lot faster. So really going through that influence ID process will help you crystallize that. Sure.
Well, some of the people I follow on LinkedIn, I'll notice a particular message that they left, a post. And then I'll notice, they changed organizations. I hadn't noticed that. They did it 6 months ago. But their content is consistent because it is about content that is of value to their audience.
That's right.
And then I find myself thinking, well, isn't this organization fortunate that she joined their team? So consistency is the key. It's always the key.
That's right.
Just because you change organizations doesn't mean that your brand is going to change.
No, not at all. And you still follow those content pillars that you established from the beginning. And
Right.
that's really what makes you authentic. Business and experience is just one side of the coin. The other side is your mission and vision.
Right. So how can someone measure influence beyond likes, follows, or vanity metrics?
Yes, we call all of those vanity metrics. But the reality is, engagement is key, relationships are key. So think about business metrics. That's how you should measure your influence. How many relationships have you built or have you deepened based on the activity that you're doing more visibly online? Have your numbers for job applicants gone up? Has your recruiting gotten stronger? Those are things that you want to be looking at as a result of the activity and the visibility that you have. A lot of people get really technical with, okay, I got this many clicks, I got this many likes, I have this much engagement on a post. Okay, those are all great numbers, but what is that doing for your business
Right.
at the end of the day? So really looking at the business metrics is where you should start. I encourage leaders to really map out who are the 15 to 25 most important people that they should be building or deepening relationships with over the next 12 to 18 months.
Right.
Map those people out and then build your content strategy around those people to engage them, to highlight them, to have conversations with them. It's not only building and deepening that relationship, it's also providing strong results for your business. And you can look back 12 to 18 months from now and say, I have this many more leads or this many new partners or this many new relationships with investors because I did that.
Right. Goes back to the idea of it's more important to build a relationship with the key 500 or 50
Yes.
than it
Yes.
is, 5,000.
Absolutely.
I used to tell people if they'd ask me to come and give a talk, I'd rather talk with the 300 most critical people than 3,000. And a lot of
Yes.
times they didn't understand that. They thought it was all about volume. No, it's not about volume. It's about targeting people you can help the most.
Absolutely. That focus and that strategy.
So, Paige, how can introverts or behind-the-scenes leaders or up-and-coming leaders build influence authentically?
I love this because I'm an introvert at heart. So it's really hard for an introvert to understand the mindset and to have the bravery to overcome this. But the reality is when becoming a strategic business influencer, building that influence, it's all about being more of you and not trying to be anything that you're not. And I think that's the biggest thing that leaders get tripped up on is they maybe see others do it in a more forward-facing way or, more celebrity-like or personality-driven. And if that's not you getting on a stage in front of thousands of people, if that's not you getting on a screen and just being able to record a video, then don't do that because it's going to be really clear that that's making you uncomfortable. It's not authentic and that's not going to help you. So if you're better at a one-on-one engagement, start an interview series, something like we're doing where we're just sitting down and having a one-on-one conversation. You're probably going to shine a little bit brighter because that's more of a comfort level for you.
Sure.
If it's sitting down and writing, that makes, really getting your thoughts out on paper, do that versus filming a video. So yes, there's advantages to being able to do different types of formats, but at the end of the day, what's more important is that you're staying authentic to yourself. You're strengthening and showcasing what you're really good at, what you're comfortable with, and you're not going too far outside that comfort zone where it gets truly visibly uncomfortable for your audience watching it.
Right. Well, in your experience, what separates influential leaders from simply visible leaders? The
biggest thing to me is the focus. So just being really clear, as we were talking about, what does this need to drive for you in your business at the end of the day? And focusing relentlessly on that. If you're just being visible to be visible, if you're just putting content out there because you think posting once a day is going to drive success for your business, yes, it drives more numbers, but is it really driving what needs to happen in your business? And like you said, Roger, speaking to those 300 people versus, 5,000, for most leaders, for most entrepreneurs, that's going to be best use of their time.
Sure.
So being relentless with what is highest and best use of my time and how can I do that more visibly, and only focus on those things, which means you might not do some of the tactics that, are traditional. Like you might not be on all the social media platforms. You might just be on one, but you do that one really well because those are the people that you need to be in front of.
So a lot of what we're talking about, building strategic influence, doesn't necessarily have to involve social media platforms.
No.
It's one-on-one or in a group inside your own organization. So that leads me to a question. How can leaders use storytelling strategically inside their organization as well as on social media?
Yeah.
What role does storytelling take?
Yeah, storytelling can be incredibly powerful when done right. And a lot of times it's really looking at the right moments to share storytelling. A lot of times this is the content where you're willing to be a little bit more vulnerable. You're able to really showcase your beginning to end, how you got there. It's one of the most successful pieces of content that you can share inside or outside your organization. But I will caution you, if that's all that you're doing, that's all that you're sharing, people are going to get tired of that. I like to tell people, think of yourself as if you are the editor-in-chief of your own newspaper. If all you're putting in your newspaper is opinion pieces, people are going to stop reading it, right? So you have to mix it in with other, with other pieces like, hey, here's this story, but here's also the latest study and why I'm talking about this, because you're probably worried about this right now too. So weaving in elements that are going on in the media and in the news, really looking at seasonally what people are thinking about and talking about, or doing a relationship building type conversation, whether it's an interview with somebody else and you're storytelling back and forth. So that's where the strategy comes in. It's a little bit cautionary to not only just share your journey, but incorporate other things that are more timely for your audience. Again, being in your audience mindset is absolutely the most important thing that you can do in order to drive value.
So without using the term, it seems that you are talking about what's called newsjacking.
Yes.
So tell us, if you will, what is newsjacking and how can it be used in building a brand? Give us an example if you could.
Well, newsjacking was a term that was coined by a guy named David Meerman Scott. He's an incredible author, speaker, but his definition is the art and science of injecting your ideas into a breaking news story so that you get your ideas noticed. And just simply what that means is, most CEOs, and this is what I share, is most leaders are already reading the news. They're already up on the latest studies. Sure. They know what's going on in their industry and what their clients or their stakeholders are concerned about. That's something that they're most likely doing daily, at least 5 to 10 minutes a day. All I'm saying with this is take it a step further and give some analysis to it and share that with others, whether it's internally with your team or externally on your LinkedIn profile, or you're hopping on and writing a quick blog or doing a podcast about it. But it's all about taking what is on the top of people's minds, what they're reading about, and sharing your analysis as an expert in your field. It shifts from you just becoming someone that's providing a service to you providing the true leading expertise, the one commenting on it first, the one giving that analysis. It's a much different lens when it comes to creating that true influence.
So how do you recommend repurposing content to maximize impact? A lot of people seem overwhelmed with the task of creating content, and it doesn't seem to occur to them that they have a lot of content they could repurpose.
Absolutely. So I like to call it upcycling, which is just taking a cornerstone piece of content and using that in different formats to get out there as much as possible. And again, so many people are like, I'm worried people are going to see that I'm posting the same thing. Well, if it's on social media, the algorithms normally take care of that. If it's on your email list, most people aren't reading the full format of content. So they're only reading the piece that you're delivering. So for example, again, the focus is important. If you've got to be building relationships with potential investors, for example, and you start an interview series where you're interviewing these investors, getting to know them, deepening the relationship, a 20-minute interview can give you, 5 to 15 pieces of content. You can splice that up into 1 minute, 30-second increments, 2-minute increments. You can do a transcript of that conversation, turn it into a blog post. You can turn it into quote graphics. You can, share different pieces of it to make short form posts. So the idea is you shouldn't be spending your time pushing out the content. You should be focused on the cornerstone content and then upcycling that as much as possible to get maximum visibility and impact.
So as platforms and trends change, and you've mentioned multiple times that they do change for various reasons, how can leaders future-proof their influence?
Yes. Again, I think it comes down to ownership of your brand. Is so incredibly important. So controlling your first impression as much as you can. So really take time to do what I call an audit and see what's out there about you whenever you search your name on Google in an AI platform, or when you search your company name on Google in an AI platform. And look at how many things can you control? What are maybe things that you forgot? I can't tell you how many times we look and we find, an old Twitter X profile that hasn't been touched in forever, and leaders cringe because they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's coming up on page 1. Yeah. That looks horrible. So really looking at that, and then also owning your audience data. That's so incredibly important because algorithms will continue to change. It'll get harder and harder to get in front of people on different platforms. It's going to become more expensive to do that. So the more that you can siphon off the exposure that you're getting now, the more brand equity you're going to have and the longer term success you're going to have with all of the efforts that you're putting into your marketing.
Well, everything you say, in my mind, keeps going back to the word strategic. You need to be strategic about doing all of this.
Absolutely.
Well, Paige, if we could, let's wrap up with a real-world scenario. As you know, I'm going to use content from this particular podcast episode for the column I write for Forbes.com. It's a platform that reaches about 125 million people each month. So let me ask, how will you strategically remarket or repurpose that Forbes coverage, as well as promote this podcast episode when it drops? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I want our listeners to get a view of how you will use a particular piece of content.
I love this. This is, getting me in my element. So thank you for this great question. Let's start with the podcast episode first. So we've been on here for, we've been talking for 45, 50 minutes, right? So I would take this podcast and slice it up into 15 to 25 clips. So probably around 2 minutes, maybe a little bit less, and remarket those clips. And that would give me, goodness, I could be remarketing this up to 6 to 8 months from now with all that content. Also taking the transcript and taking one of those clips, putting a piece of the transcript into the email list and sharing some of these topics. I'll probably try to find with the email list in particular, my newsletter, some sort of headline that is news driven. So connecting back to a recent study that ties in this conversation and why people should be paying